Whatever job you're in, if you're the teacher, you cannot walk into the principal and say, I just had a fantastic week teaching. I want a raise. You could be the most brilliant teacher of all time, but you're going to be in the same pay band as the worst teacher the school has ever known. But what I could do is say, I want to be a teacher, but I'm going to take the 5 questions other teachers most often ask me, and I'm going to create an online course to teach other teachers how to be a better teacher. So now I'm making more money. I have a sense of control over my income, solving the problems that I'm good at that other people often ask my help for.
Welcome to the Be Unbound podcast. My name is Jonathan Brush. I'm here. I do know how to pronounce my last name. I'm here with my co-host and our producer and the man that actually makes it all run and can produce his own last name. David, introduce yourself.
And I am your co-host, David Rethemeyer. Jonathan, I feel like the length in our last names and the complexity of them should probably give an indication of who should be able to pronounce our last names, but we'll let that go for the time.
It may give an indication of which one of us slept the most last night, David. So listeners, I don't know if this happens to you, but every time I've had a malfunctioning fire smoke detector in my house, it only occurs between the hours of 2 and 4 a.m. in the morning.
Yep.
And so last night, the smoke alarm went off, which, in the middle of the night, you kind of think it's going off because there's a fire. So you get up for that. And then it's like, there's no fire. But of course, now I'm awake looking around. And so I kind of mess with the smoke alarm. And then I sort of sit there and it goes off again. So then you take the batteries out of it. But you know what happens, David, when you wake up at like 3:30 in the morning thinking there's a fire, there's no fire, and then you disable your smoke alarm? You spend the rest of the night thinking it would be terrible if we had a real fire tonight, right? I mean, like, so anyhow, that's the best excuse I have for not being able to pronounce my own last name. But I can tell you that the interview we're about to share with you was a lot of fun. There was no mispronunciations of names happening as far as I know. And we're delighted to introduce you to Derrick Kinney. We were introduced to Derrick by John Skomsky. By the way, John Skomsky has a podcast called Think, Live, Repeat, and check that out. We are super proud of John because, first of all, he's a cool guy. Secondly, we have some credit for him being a cool guy because he's an alum of our program and also does some stuff with us. And so check out John Skomsky's stuff. But he introduced us to Derrick, and David, this is a fun conversation and super useful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Derrick has a lot of insights into finances and creating value no matter where you're at as far as your current financial situation. And also, he brings this out very early on in the podcast, but he's somebody who very intentionally invests in people and wants to look at and call out the value that is inherent in people that God has given them. And so, yeah, that's just an absolutely fantastic combination, I think, and absolute pleasure to talk to.
Well, Derrick will inspire you. He will engage you. He will make you laugh. He will make you think, and he will challenge you. And so hang on for this conversation. It's a good one. Derrick, welcome to the Be Unbound podcast. We are absolutely delighted to have you here. And for the audience, it is our great delight to introduce you to Derrick Kinney. He is the author of Good Money Revolution, as well as a whole bunch of other things that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But we found out about Derrick when one of the folks who is an alumni of our program recommended his book. And we ended up using it as a textbook for our financial advantage class for our year 2 Ascend students. And then, man, what a kick here a month or so back, when that same alumni introduced me to Derrick and we got a chance to talk. And then I had the great pleasure of being on Derrick's podcast recently. And so, Derrick, we're really thrilled and honored to have you here on our podcast now.
Well, that makes me feel really good. Thank you, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be here. And I got to tell you, your interview that I did with you was spectacular. I hope to live up to the lofty goal that you set. So here we go.
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't know. Hopefully it works the other way, but it is easy to do a spectacular interview when you have a good host. And so hopefully we can return the favor. You certainly played that role for me when I was on yours. And folks, you should check out the Good Money podcast. I did not know about it until I talked to Derrick and I got invited on it. So, like a good guest, I was like, well, I should listen to a couple of these things. And so I have not only listened to a couple of them, I've gone pretty deep into the catalog and found lots there that was really helpful and very interesting. And so, yeah, this is just an endorsement that first, you should definitely buy the book. Secondly, the podcast is worth your time. And it was a definite fringe benefit of being on was to be able to know about the podcast. So Derrick, thanks for all the good work you're doing there and the Yeah, that's a pretty serious body of content you build up, man. So
Well, thank you. It's a lot of fun. And I joke, I hope that our listeners learn stuff because I, as the host, I think learn the most. And it's so much fun to have just great quality people on. And what we find is they're all real.
yeah.
They're all just real people like you and I. They're just happen to be doing extraordinary things.
Yeah, the podcasting world is really interesting in the fact that you kind of get into it and then all of a sudden you get some guests. And then sometimes you sit and pinch yourself and you go, wait a second, I can't believe I get an opportunity to talk to this person. And the fact that the mic is running is just like an added, I mean, the
That's
recorder's
right.
running is just an added bonus. So, Derek, you've done lots of things. And I think you're probably best known for being a financial advisor through the book, The Good Money Revolution, kind of your attitude and your approach to managing money. Recently, you're becoming known for something really cool you're doing with teens. And so we wanted to make sure that we talk about that. But hey, rather than me give you the bio for everybody, would you give us your bio? Tell us a little bit about how you got from where you were to where you are right now.
Yeah. So let me go back to when I was really just a kid. We moved around 6 times before the 6th grade. And I tell you that because it was very formative in terms of how I developed relationships and how shy I was as a young person. I was born in Washington State. My dad was a metallurgical engineer, and he would either get, lose a job, transfer job. So we ended up in Buffalo, New York, and then down in Arlington, Texas in 1980. So I'm entering the 6th grade. And one of the gifts that I now call that God gave me was a very, very large nose. Okay. And what that meant was it put me on a pathway that I don't want anybody else to have to walk. And I was teased mercilessly as a kid. I was teased in 6th grade. I was teased all the way through junior high into high school. But one day, my mom gave me a book, sensing my desperation, sensing my loneliness, sensing my pleas for I've got to have something different in my life. A book by a woman named Judy Zarifa. The book was called Go For It, simple book, and it was basically a book about how to survive the teenage years. And one particular chapter piqued my interest. It was called How to Be Popular. Well, I read that chapter and then I reread it and reread it. And basically, it taught me about how to look into people's eyes and how to use people's names and how to make people feel important. So I began to put into practice. I had nothing to lose the principles of this book. Well, what happened then was I built confidence and I began to develop friendships and relationships, so much so that my junior year, I made a big bet on myself. And I decided to run for student body president in my high school. I had a couple disadvantages though. One was I did not come from the gene pool of the popular kids. That was problem number one. Number two was I wasn't well known in the school. There was 5 other people running, but I had this idea and I would reach out to the leaders of all the different groups in the school because I realized we were all a bunch of nobodies with the heart of a somebody. And I reached out to the rock and roll crowd and the athletic crowd and the band crowd and the honor roll crowd. And I got a picture of myself and them shaking hands. And I put that picture on a poster board above where they would hang out, endorsing me. Well, when the crackle of the microphone came at the end of election day and they said, your student body president is Derrick Kinney, man, I still get emotional talking about it. Gosh, everybody was excited. And because it wasn't just me that won that day, it was all of us won. Suddenly, everybody who'd been overlooked, not listened to, not valued, felt like they were part of something bigger. And we just had our class reunion about 5 years ago. And many people walked up and said, Derek, do you remember the election? And I was shocked because here was something that I thought at the time was about me, and it was all about all of us. And what it taught me was that even a kid with a big nose who feels like he's at the end of his rope, when you begin to put others first and take the pity party off of you and make yourself not the villain and the person who is taking on the bad stuff, and you make other people feel valued, your life can dramatically change.
Wow, that's such a powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm struck by the fact that, there's an interesting, I think, reality in life that sometimes people are gifted at a certain thing. And because they're gifted at it, they lean into it a little bit, but they never get really good at it because they never really understand how it works, right? I sometimes see this with athletes, right? They're very coordinated, they're very gifted. And so they kind of hit a plateau because for a while they were better than everybody else without trying. But then when they got into really stiff competition, they didn't really know why they were good. They didn't know how to get to the next step. And a little bit of what I heard from your story is that, you had this interesting situation where you weren't good at something. So then you really studied it. And then you were able to take a different path. You kind of took a different perspective. And because of that, succeeded not only in a way that helped you, but were able to take that and sort of spread that gift to some other people. I think that that's a really fascinating, yeah, a fascinating perspective and a really powerful story. So thanks for sharing that. So you learn this, and then obviously, I mean, it's evident if anybody spends any time around you or listening to your content that you continue to prioritize bringing other people in and making other people a part of what you're doing. But that has happened initially primarily in the financial space. So let's talk about that, and then I want to talk about what you're doing with teen success after that. So tell me
You bet.
about your journey, your professional journey there.
Yeah, so I went on to college, University of Texas at Arlington, here in Arlington, Texas. And the funny challenge was I actually ran for student body president there using the same principles. And what it taught me was I thought that was just reserved for high school. But what I realized was no, everybody wants to feel seen and heard and valued. And when you do that, it opens doors of relationships, which then led me to discover that it's all about being known, liked, and trusted. When people know you, like you, trust you, they want to do business with you. So I then left UTA and went to my first job at a software company in Fort Worth. And I was in over my head from the very beginning. I had a communication degree. I had taken one finance class in college and thought that I would just crush the world. Well, I went to work for a small business and I learned a couple lessons there. Now, I'm an avid tither. I love to give my 10% and more to the church, but there was a problem working for a small company, and that was my boss bounced my paycheck not once, but twice. And so it was so unnerving to call my pastor and say, hey, you know that check I wrote you? Please don't cash it because it's as hot as the oven is in my house right now. And it just taught me that one day when I have a business, I just felt inside I would have my own business. I want to make sure I always have payroll because I realized people are happier when they're paid and their paychecks deposit and don't bounce. And so what happened was in my really disdain of that job, I went back and got at night all my licenses to become a financial advisor. And I learned this because my parents were in a situation where they provided for us the best they could, but they never seemed to make progress toward their financial goals. And as I would see their friends, they were all in the same boat. And I realized someone needs to be available to make money make sense to my parents' generation. And I believed it was such a time for me to do it. And so that's what led me to have that passion. So I then cut the cord, bet on myself, burned the ships essentially, and went into this business. But then I had a problem. And the problem was I was 25 years old. I looked like I was 13. And I had to be honest and say, who in the world is going to invest with a guy that looks like this? Okay. There were people who were in the country clubs. They were smarter, more experienced. They just had it all going for them. But I knew that God had me on this path. I felt a confidence that he would make the way. And what I realized was when I was in high school, nobody ever went back to the high school to recognize students or teachers. I mean, I thought if I would have had some professionals come back to me as a senior in high school and give me a sense of what the real world could look like, that would have changed everything. But nobody did. And so I had this idea to go back to my alma mater high school, Sam Houston High School here in Arlington, and I would present a Teacher of the Month and a Student of the Month award. So I talked him into doing the award, and I came over there with a $50 Amazon gift card for the teacher, a $25 Amazon gift card for the student, and we got a picture taken together. And then we began to put the picture in what were called newspapers. Back in the day, they were these papery things that people would use. It's long ago technology now. But what shocked me was I began to get phone calls in my office from people saying, hey, Derrick, we'd like you to be our financial advisor. Well, after the third time this happened, and this was the most unprofessional thing I could have possibly done, but I just had to know. I said, ma'am, if you don't mind me asking, I'm 25 years old. I'm brand new to this business. Why do you want to invest your hard-earned money with me? And what she said changed everything for how I thought about business. She said, Derrick, we want to invest with you and have you be our advisor because you care about what we care about. You care about what we care about. And that paradigm completely changed how I ran my business, because what I realized was, as a financial advisor or any professional, we're all commodities. To the consumers, we all look the same, do the same. They just pick based on whatever they pick based on. But because I was giving back to the community, I was opening this doorway for people to be part of something bigger. And when I realized when I could make people feel valued, important, and heard, and now part of something bigger, that was the doorway that skyrocketed my business, that overcame how youthful I looked, my inexperience. Because as the old adage says, no one cares about how much you know. They only want to know how much you care.
Mhm. Well, that is, I think when learned this as somebody doing sales, and they were basically saying the same thing. And as somebody, Derek, who grew up with a very limited amount of money, and then kind of paid for college myself, and still had, then had a young family, and always had this kind of limited amount of money. I thought, well, that's the craziest thing ever. Like, I'm looking for I'm looking for the bottom line. I'm looking for the smallest amount of numbers. And it was an interesting paradigm shift for me to understand how important that was. And then it was interesting for me to realize that as soon as I got the choice, I would choose the same thing too. In other words, that
Yeah.
some of that was, as I was youthful, was because I didn't have a very broad network. So I just bought from, I was buying sort of commodity type things. But as soon as I got into those personal things where I needed a CPA, when I needed a financial advisor, when it was time to buy a car, all of a sudden that became absolutely paramount. I just had right before this, we're recording this, I had a call with a close friend, and this person is getting ready to do a big financial thing that they've never done before. It's a large purchase. And they were saying, I'm so lost. I really want, like, this guy on the other end. It involves land deals. So it's like this guy on the other end is a mortgage guy. And I just have to believe whatever he tells me. And I just wish I had somebody that I trusted that could help me think through this. And yeah, it doesn't, to your point, this person wouldn't really care about the credentials. They just say, do you do this stuff? Sort of, maybe, kind of. And can I trust you?
Right.
You're in. Like, like I'll pay you to help me with that. That's a really important thing that often people don't initially realize. Well, let's come back to the teen success thing a little bit. I want to end up with that. But in between, so you wrote this book, Good Money Revolution. Like I said, we use it as a textbook for our class, our financial advantage class.
Thank you for that, by the way. I appreciate that.
Oh man, it's us should be thanking you. It is such a great text, and it's been so much fun to talk to
Thank you.
students. And I'll tell you, Derek, what was interesting to me was, okay, so full disclosure here. I've struggled with understanding financial things. Now, I've been blessed in that I learned some core basic financial stuff, so I never overspent, always ran good budgets. I never really picked up any debt, so to speak of. But, when it got to be like investments and all that kind of stuff, it just was always very frustrating and very confusing. And so I came from this background where there was never enough, and the way to get more was to spend less. Now, that's very different from most successful people, where the way to get more is to earn more. But that was not a paradigm that I grew up in. That wasn't really a kind of a framework of thinking that I knew about. And so I read Thou Shalt Prosper.
Yeah.
And it was this book, and it kind of was this lightning bolt for me. And I was like, no, wait a second. There's a whole different way to look at this. And so this mindset of abundance versus a mindset of scarcity became something that was really important to me. And I wanted to really share with students. But it was one of those situations where it's like, I know this is important, but I also know that I don't really understand this. And so that's why your book was so helpful, because I read your book and I was like, here's somebody that has the same idea, but he understands it. He actually knows what he's talking about. So if you will, this mindset of abundance, this idea that earning money can be good. Derek, that was something that I struggled with probably until my early 40s. Was deep down, I had this sneaking suspicion that if I earned too much money, everything I loved it would cost me everything I loved. Totally illogical, totally ridiculous, theologically suspect in every way. And yet it took me into my 40s till I could uncover that and look at it. So talk about that a little bit, because that's a big part of, especially the first part of your book.
Well, as you just described, I think a lot of our listeners may feel that same way, that even though this isn't the right way to think, it's the person's present reality. And so therefore, that's where we have to start. And what I think about, I saw a report that came out recently on CNBC, and they talked about how there's now about 5 people, one of which will likely be the first trillionaire in U.S. history in the next couple years. And what they talked about is how all the wealth has shifted to these five people: Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and the list goes on, and then the rest of us. Well, the problem with that way of writing and thinking is it could make a teenager, could make a young person, could make anybody think that, oh, they already have all the
Right.
money.
They've
And
got the
therefore,
5%, right? Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
right, there's no money left for me. And what we find is when you realize what they did to create the wealth, it unlocks the secret door for people to say, oh, it's not the fact that they've locked up all the money. Now you just have to unlock the secrets of how they created all the money. And part of that is we know that money chases value. For example, if we buy, for example, I mean, I've bought a variety of things over the years. There's a new style of shoes, a new style of shirt, a new phone. All these things are new, and people seem to find the money to buy the things that intrigue them. And so the question becomes then is, how do you become the person to create something that people want to buy? Because we know that there are certain ways to make money, whether you're helping people make more money, save more money, increase their time, take stress out of their life, have a better family life, be a better parent. There's a lot of ways to add value. And so what I would tell people is money is not a limited resource. It's only limited to how you're able to think about how much money you could possibly make. Now, Jonathan, let me share with your viewers something that you might even cut me off the air as I say this. It's going to be so controversial, but the point is that whatever you are making right now, whatever your salary is what the economy is telling that you are worth right now. Your current salary is the economy telling you what you're worth. Well, that's not fair. And I don't disagree with you. That is completely not fair. When you think about a teacher who molds young lives and invests in them, and people look back to their third grade teacher and say, if only, I had more people like Mrs. Smith in my life, and that they're making probably $40,000 to $50,000 a year. And then you think about the athletes who are making millions of dollars a year. Well, that's because the economy is saying we value what that athlete does more than what other people do. And so you have a decision to make when it comes to these types of issues. I can either complain, I can throw rocks in their windows, I can criticize them, I can waste all of my precious breath on criticizing the wealthy, or I can say, I want to become wealthy too. So what can I do to learn from them to have my fair share of the wealth as well? And my whole concept of the book is that money is not bad and that good people should have more of it. And what this produces is sort of this moral dilemma, if you will, of if bad people have money, what do they typically do with it? Well, they do bad things with it. We can look at different, government leaders all around the world who suppress their people and take away every opportunity, and they hoard the money for themselves. And I find that people who make money and use money to help other people make money and build them up, they're the people who were thanked in the speeches. They're the people who, when they get into the Hall of Fame, they thank that coach, they thank that mentor, that leader because of the influence they had. And so I would just tell people today is, just between you and I, if you want 2024 to be a better year, a different year financially than last year, if you're not making the money that you feel like you deserve right now, you've got to do something different. Because what you've always done will not get you what you've always wanted. And so that's what I would say to people is money is not scarce, money is not limited, but unfortunately, well-meaning parents, well-meaning grandparents have often ingrained us to believe that our opportunities are limited. And I talk about in the book, there's, the picture of a parent meaning well that may slam their fist on the kitchen table and say, honey, if only we had more money, then we could buy the shoes you want, or then we could go to the restaurant and eat out. Or the dreaded thing, and I hate when people say this, but they say to their kids, kids, in life, there's the haves and the have-nots. And unfortunately, and they throw God's name in there, which is even worse, God just didn't make us part of the have family. And so our options are always limited. I mean, imagine a well-meaning parent telling a son or daughter that they grew up thinking, well, nope, this is my cap. This is my cap. And that is just not right. I want to pull back that cap And I want to make sure that they blast off into their full God-given potential.
I think what comes with that sometimes is that there is my theory is that there's a misunderstanding of how wealth, as you just really explained very well there, of how wealth is generated, how it's earned, of that doing something that's valuable. And so a family, a parent misunderstands that. And so they're frustrated, and then maybe they're getting some bad CNBC stories or whatever. And so then in an effort to sort of justify that, and this is what some of my background was, it wasn't ever explicitly stated, but it was things like, we're going to compensate with something else. So we don't have a lot of money, but we have a great family.
Right.
Well, I think when my parents said that, they were not the kind of people that was angry with rich people. And they were very good at teaching that everybody's made in the image of God. And so I had fantastic values from them there. So they weren't doing it consciously, but subconsciously they're kind of saying, well, we don't have a lot of money, but we have great relationships with each other. We have a great family. We have great. And so I started growing up thinking, well, if you want to have a great family, clearly you can't have money.
Yes, yes.
More money will corrode that. And I look back on that, I think my parents would be appalled if I said that that's what I took away from it. I don't think that they deeply believe that, but subconsciously they sort of said that. But I want to rewind a little bit. Derrick, you said something really important here, I think, about creating value. And you used the teachers as an example. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and one of the podcast hosts was kind of stating it's a sad fact that our country, our society does not value creators any more than it does. And he was thinking about, say, for example, music artists. And he was saying, there's so much valuable they have. And then, because of the way things are set up with Spotify and all this stuff, they make very little money. I thought that, and I thought, I'm not sure that's true, because I think there's a supply and demand here piece that is present, but nobody wants to talk about. And so you said this might get you kicked off the podcast. I don't know if Dave will kick me off here or not. But here's the controversial thing I would say. I think that people don't want to admit it, but there's actually a pretty solid supply of very talented artists. I would say that I don't move in Nashville circles. And yet I could name easily half a dozen people I know who are at least as good as anybody I ever hear play, who is a big name performer, right? And that given the right circumstances, they absolutely have the talent. There's just no question. There's some Unbound students, and if you're listening, you might know who you are, who absolutely sing better than people that have recording labels, right? But what I think turns out is that distribution's really hard. And that building something like Spotify is actually far more difficult and complicated than playing a mean lick on a guitar. And so there is a sort of a correct assessment there of value by the economy. There's a reason that the people that built Spotify are making more money than the artists. And I don't say that in like a kind of, oh, this is a bad thing, but more of a, if you kind of peek behind the curtain a little bit, there is a way to increase your value, and that is to do something more valuable. Does that make sense? And maybe to react to that a little bit.
Oh, I think it makes perfect sense. And ultimately, just like the stock market, while people attempt to understand it and attempt to predict it and look like they know it, they've mastered it for a certain amount of time, ultimately the market gets back at them and they lose money. It's always this way of correcting itself efficiently. And that's what I would say to your example as well is, you may be the most talented singer the world has ever seen, that we should all acknowledge your raw talent, but often it's the person that markets themselves, that believes in themselves, that positions themselves in the best way for opportunities, that they may not have the best voice, but they've got a good enough voice, but people connect with them on a very relational level. And so what I would tell people right now is, whatever job you're in, if you're the police officer, you're the fireman, you're the teacher, that's great. But the reality is, and the cold, hard truth is, you cannot walk into the principal and say, you know what, I just had a fantastic week teaching, I want a raise. That's not going to work. You could be the most brilliant teacher of all time, but you're going to be in the same pay band as the worst teacher the school has ever known. And that's just the fact of your job. And so then you have a decision to make. Okay, I'm going to continue teaching, but I can't complain about my salary anymore because I know the system I've chosen to be a part of. But what I could do is say, I want to be a teacher, but now I'm going to take some of the talent, or I'm going to take the 5 questions other teachers most often ask me, and I'm going to create an online course to teach other teachers how to be a better teacher. So now I'm making more money. I have a sense of control over my income. solving the problems that I'm good at that other people often ask my help for. And so that's a great example of wherever you're at right now, whether you're the receptionist who I've coached before about Derrick. And by the way, please don't bang on your boss's door demanding the raise. They might give you the 2% or 3% just to say go away, but ultimately that doesn't increase your value. You want to find ways to save money, make money, or help grow the business. And as an example, one of the receptionists that I worked with as a client many, many years ago, they were very, very wealthy, but she loved working for this small firm, but she wanted to make more money. And I said, you don't bang on your boss's door. That's not going to work. Instead, in your role right now, what could you do to help the boss save more time, help the company grow, and help them cut costs? Well, she was in charge of ordering supplies. And I said, what if you just write down some creative ideas? And one was that every dollar she saved in supplies from the year before, she would ask for a 10% bonus. So company saves 90 cents, she gets 10%. They were like, that sounds great. What a great way to incentivize saving money. Also, they didn't really have a marketing department. So she said, hey, what if we give a bonus out to anybody who refers new business into the company? Well, suddenly now everybody in the company was super motivated to make more money. The company grew and the boss realized I'm making in spades more money than I'm paying out in bonuses. And so this also goes the other way, that if you're the owner of the company, let your employees become entrepreneurs in your organization. And don't ever try to say, oh, I paid you too much in bonus. That's too much. You're always making more than you're paying out.
Well, it's interesting as you were saying this. John Skomsky is the alum I referred to that introduced us, and he also introduced us to. Oh man, wrote Blue Collar Riches. Ken. I can't
Ken
think of his last
Rusk.
name. Ken Rusk. Thank you very much. I was like,
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
I
Ken's a
had
good
it right
dude.
before I said
Yeah.
it. Yeah, and I had a conversation with Ken, and he was talking about intrapreneurs, and that was a term that I had heard before. In fact, I heard it at a company I worked for. I'm from a guy, and it was really influential with me, but I kind of forgotten about it. And so, as Derrick says this, if you're listening, maybe just a quick reminder that there's kind of three systems that just got outlined here. And it might be really helpful to think about. If you're in a system where you love what you're doing, but it's not going to reward you more, you're a teacher, right? You're in that situation, or you're maybe an artist or something. Although artist is a little different. So let's say with a teacher, you're in a big system, you love what you're doing. Law enforcement would be another good example. You work for the fire department. There's some ways you do a side hustle, or there's some ways that you can take what you've learned and you can monetize that in different ways and regain control of your financial destiny there. There's being an entrepreneur, and the world needs more entrepreneurs, and we're really excited about that. But entrepreneurs are a rare breed. There's a higher level of risk and things of that nature. And then there's another way that I think a lot of people don't think about, but to me is where the most valuable part is that you can join a team of people who can help you in so many different ways. But the way you make money there as an entrepreneur is you do exactly what Derrick just outlined here, which is you say, hey, I've got this team of people around us, and I found a way to save more money, to increase sales, to create more value. Not every organization will let you do that, and that can be a good indicator whether you're working for a good organization
That's
or
right.
not.
That's right.
But that can be a much faster way in some cases, because you don't have to know everything. You get to be part of a team that does all of those things. And I think so many people think that they're locked into whatever they arrive to do. But in my experience, and Unbound is a great example of this, and we'll pick on David since he hasn't said anything much, but David has come into Unbound and has created value in areas we didn't even know we could create value in, and he saved us money in different places. He's actually done everything you've mentioned there, Derrick. And so, when we grow, the first thing we look at is like, man, we got to find a way to grow with David, right? Like we'd be in such bad shape if we didn't have him.
Right.
But, that means that he didn't have to do all those things. He just concentrated on things he's really good at. But then that brought tremendous value to us. And then, yes, we're highly motivated and incentivized to pass that value back to the people that deliver. So, yeah, thanks for pointing it out, because I think that's a really important part that people don't really see.
Well, and if I can just tack on to that, something that I kind of learned from going through Unbound and seeing a lot of my friends who are my age end up spinning their wheels when they get into their first career jobs is that they realize that a lot of people go into especially early on in their careers, and they think if I just do a good job at what I am assigned, then I will move up and I will be rewarded and I will just continue moving up and I will be successful. And unfortunately, that has been the case in some certain sectors and in some periods of time, but especially now in the information age, that is less and less true. And I think, Derek, what you've done a fantastic job at explaining is that what people are rewarded for doing is not necessarily just doing what they are assigned, but looking for ways to add and create value in the company that is outside of the scope of just what you're assigned to do, or using the opportunities that you've been given based on what you have been assigned to say, hey, here's a way that we can cut costs or look to like increase incentives, make more money, look for ways to add value based on what you learn of doing the things that you have been assigned. And so I think this is incredibly valuable for a lot of people, students or their parents included.
Well, I would disagree. I think, David, what you said there is spot on. I love that. And it reminds me as you were talking, I think we can give people the tools to be successful, but they will often not be effective if we don't address some of the inner false beliefs people have. And I want to tell you a quick story. So I was in the office on a Saturday morning catching up on some things. And as I walked into my office, I saw my voicemail light blinking. And I had that decision to make. I could either just focus on what I intended to work on, or I could press the button. And a voice inside just said, Derrick, you need to listen to this message. I pressed the button, and shockingly was a woman's panicked voice that said, Derrick, you have to call me back right away. I know it's Saturday. Call me back as soon as possible. They're about to send me to jail. Click. Well, I have never heard a voicemail message like that. So I quickly called her back and I said, tell me what's going on. She said, Derrick, I got this letter in the mail. It says I didn't have money in my account and I wrote a check and now they're going to send me to jail. I said, okay, now help me understand. So it says basically non-sufficient funds. And she said, yes. I said, okay, first of all, they're not going to send you to jail. You can take a deep breath. I wanted to take her off the ledge. But I said, tell me why this is causing you such a panic. Well, she begins to tell me a story back when she was a child. Her dad had gone to the store to buy some school supplies for she and her sister, and they got a call at home from the store manager to her dad, and she overheard it. And the manager said, sir, you bounced a check, and we're going to send the police over there to send you to jail. So this woman, who was now almost 60 years old and on the outside, the picture of success, highly respected, was telling me something that had held her back financially for like 55 years. And once we got it sorted out, I said, we'll call the bank together on Monday. We'll help you move money from your savings to checking. We'll get it taken care of. But I want to meet you in my office next week to unpack all that's happened. So as we're in this visit together in my office, we began to realize that the advice I would give her over the years, which was actually very good financial advice, would have made her quite a bit of money, she was always hesitant to take. And she was always complaining about, I feel like I'm worth more money than I'm making. And she would talk about getting passed over for a promotion. Well, what happened was, as we began to realize that she had a false money belief. And that was, if you make a financial mistake, you're going to go to jail. And if you mess up, well, then bad things are going to happen to you. So better for you to stay off the radar and not risk making a bad financial move, which could cost you in many ways. And once we began to talk about this, she actually began to laugh at herself for believing something that was taught to her 55 years ago. And I was shocked, but within about 3 months, she got about a $15,000 raise, got promoted, and most importantly and selfishly, she began to take my advice, for goodness sakes, which made her money. And it was just a lesson of, don't ever underestimate when people on the outside look like they have it all together, because they could be as mixed up as anybody else on the inside. And it's really our job to help pull out, and I like to call myself a potential extractor. How can I pull out of people every ounce of potential, whether it's financially, relationally, so that they can be the best version of themselves? Because ultimately, when they're at that level, now they're adding the most value. They can do the most for the causes they care about. And I believe it makes God super happy that the people he created are actually using the gifts that he gave us, and we're not letting these fake beliefs hold us back.
Well, if you're listening, you can tell that Derrick is a fantastic extractor and certainly a fantastic teacher of financial principles and principles of creating value and jobs and entrepreneurship and business and all those things. And Derrick has kind of doubled down on that. He told me in a conversation recently that he took his own advice and burned the boats and now has gone full into running a program called Simple Teen Success. And so as we finish up here, Derrick, tell us a little bit about what Simple Team Success is and tell our audience how they can find out more about it.
Well, let me go back to when we first started this conversation about when I was in high school. I would have loved to have had somebody come back and talk about here's how to make money and here's how to start a business in high school, or here's how to have confident conversations with adults so that you stand out. But nobody ever did. And so you have to figure these things out on your own. And as I talk to parents these days, I find one of their biggest concerns is all of their teens, as a default, their faces are buried in their phone. When they have a friend over, they sit next to each other on the couch, buried in their phone. When they introduce them to another adult, they simply look down and don't engage the adult. And what we find is that there's three simple things that teens can do to be successful. They need to be known, liked, and trusted. And so I just said, no more. I want to do what I can to help remedy this. And so I launched a program called Simple Teen Success. But what I realized is when you work with teens, you've got to bring your A game. You've got to be the entertainer that keeps them engaged and entertained while they're learning. And they just happen to learn in the midst of being and having fun. So what we decided to do was we wanted to have some cool music. We talk about a money skill, a business skill, and a life skill. And this is every other Tuesday night, 8 o'clock Central. And we also have some cool guests on. So for example, last night we had on the band leader and drummer for the Darius Rucker Band. He was super cool. And here is a popular musician talking about he's raising his 21-year-old daughter, how he taught us how to be consistent and listen. We've had Will Gadara, who opened up the #1 restaurant in all of the world, talking about how to provide unreasonable hospitality. So the goal is I want to put people in these teens' lives that they can see they've established and done extraordinary things, but they're just ordinary people when you peel it all back. And so we give them a worksheet to fill out. So the goal is they're getting the tools they don't teach in schools. But what I believe and my huge big vision is that we will impact the lives of 1 million teens. And what we've done as we roll this out nationally, we've decided to make it free, which is crazy, but we want to give this opportunity to every teen who wants to be a part of it. So the first year, completely free. We'll probably get sponsorships on the back end, but we want no teen to be left behind. And that's why we're doing this, because I want to make sure that this generation has is equipped and they're believed in and feel like they have the confidence to take on the challenges that we need them to take on.
Well, Derrick, where can we learn more about what you're doing and about Simple Teen Success? And we'll obviously put all this in the show notes, but if you're listening, where can we find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah. Simply go to simpleteensuccess.com, simpleteensuccess.com. Also a great way to follow me is on Instagram. That's kind of my social of choice at Derrick T. Kinney, where we post tips to save money and make money every single day, and also tips for teens as well. But Simple Teen Success is the place to enroll teens for free and give them the tools that you want them to have. We're sort of the teen whisperer that we tell your teens what you want them to know, but they don't always listen to you. And I'm a parent. I get it.
Well, I follow Derrick on Instagram. I recommend that highly. I recommend that you buy Good Money Revolution. Recommend that you go to Simple Teen Success and find out what's going on there. And Derrick, thank you so much for your time, for the expertise that you've shared, and for your continued heart of service. What you teach and what you taught here really is important and really does make a big difference to those willing to listen. So everybody, if you're listening, pay attention. And Derrick, thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jonathan. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Well, I hope you learned as much from our conversation as I did. Like I said, when I read Derrick's stuff, when I was on his podcast recently, when I had conversations with him, I just come away going, man, yes, exactly. And there's so much that Derrick says that I agree with, but he actually knows what he's talking about. That's always kind of fun when you're like, yeah, that's what I think. Oh, yeah, but he actually understands what he's talking about. And now I understand better what I think, and that makes a lot of sense. So that was a fun conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just listening to this, thinking back to my days in graduate business classes, where a lot of similar concepts were being talked about creating value and investing in people. but in just the most academic and dry and unpractical ways that they could possibly be communicated. And I'm just sitting here listening to Derek discuss these things going, this is 10 times more helpful and interesting than the way that I learned it back when I was in grad school. And so, yeah, this is immensely helpful.
Think that Derek is one of those people that reminds you that, whatever you did before, it was perfectly designed to get you to where you are now. But you still have control and the ability to impact where you want to go next. And yeah, that might take some work, it might take some effort, it takes all those things. But ultimately, you get a say in that, and that there's a path that you can take, and there's tools that you can use, and doing things like reading Derek's book and listening to him and putting into practice some of the things he teaches can put you on the road to doing something different. And his first story about being to moving into a new high school and then being the kid that won the student body president, I just thought was an absolute fantastic example of the stuff he talks about. So
Yeah. And yeah, I just loved especially hearing his passion for helping teens and young adults to get the tools that they need for success, because here at Unbound, that is a passion that we share very much. And so Jonathan and I were just saying that, yeah, with the work that he's doing with Simple Teen Success and the work that we do here at Unbound with several of our programs just really goes hand in hand. And so we have a bunch of different ways that we go about doing that. One of the first ways that we go about doing that is our Navigate course, where really we just look at the very practical skill of helping young adults to make good decisions and to de-stress the process of trying to understand what God's purpose for their life is and how to move forward in their life and their career choices. And from there, we also have our high school programs. We have Equip for 9th through 11th graders that will go along with pretty much any sort of homeschool high school curriculum and is designed to come alongside students and give them some coaching and some helpful practical study skills and ways that they can start preparing for whatever they have coming up after high school. And then we also have our Explore program, which is for 12th grade students, and that is designed to give them a nice on-ramp into a college alternative or a college program via some dual credit courses and some resources for helping them kind of put everything together and to graduate from high school as well. And then our real flagship program that we are really excited about is Ascend. And that is a program that is designed for young adults who have graduated high school or are finishing up high school that are looking at traditional university programs like some of the ones that I went through for graduate school, and are thinking, how can I go about preparing to succeed in the real world and not spend an inordinate amount of money, get an inordinate amount of debt, learn a bunch of things that may be useful, but only once I actually learn how to apply them, and I'll learn them in a really boring way that doesn't actually give me tools that I can use right now. And so what Ascend is designed to do is give students the opportunity to learn practical real world skills that they can put into practice in their local communities, and also do it in the context of relationships with other students and in wherever God has placed them. And so if you want to find out about any of those programs, you can visit our website, beunbound.us. That is beunbound.us. You can find the link to that and everything else that we talked about in this episode down in the show notes below.
On social media recently, David, there's been some articles going around with a headline that says 50% of U.S. companies have eliminated bachelor's degree requirements.
Yeah, I've seen
And
that.
I think that what happens is there's just a real stress here on the practical skills, the stuff that actually works, the kinds of ways to create value that Derek was talking about. And that's the heart and soul and the very essence of what we teach in all the programs at Unbound. So if you're wondering how you can take advantage of the fact that these companies are willing to hire people that can create value, who can help them save money and make money, and if you want to be an entrepreneur, we specialize in training, preparing you for that, and then connecting you to the companies that help you do those things. So check that out. Thank you so much for your time. David, you and I are off to base camp. By the time this airs,
Yes.
base camp will have already happened. But if you're listening to this, as we record this, we are just about to leave for our second big live event of the year down in Gulf Shores, Alabama, which is not as warm as it sometimes is, but it is a lot warmer than either place that David and I are right now.
Yes.
And so we're looking forward to getting there, looking forward to that. And we'll have some follow-ups in in the weeks ahead. Social media, you'll get to see some of the updates on YouTube. We'll have the wrap up video. And maybe David, you and I'll do a podcast time about what happened at base camp when it's all over. But that's the next big exciting thing in our schedule. Until we meet you again and at this place or wherever else we might run across you, reminder to be unbound.